Hey Glory, we're just getting started with this live, so if you want to doom scroll by, that's cool. If not, hang out for a few minutes as we get more people to join. So we're going to have a guest show today, taking guests from the right and the left, talking about how politics and government is negatively impacting your life or in relationships. So just started the live a few seconds ago, so waiting for TikTok to expose this to a larger audience and to talk about fixing shit, right? How do we fix government? Because we certainly can. I was having an interesting discussion with someone on Reddit today, which I was taken aback with. Not taken aback, just, when you're speaking to someone of a Gen Z, you always learn something new about what Gen Z feels about their life and versus millennials versus Gen X and so forth. So it was an interesting conversation, but let's wait till this live gets exposed to more people. Then we're going to have a guest show where I'm going to be taking guests from the right and the left and the center and just talking about sort of a Dave Ramsey style show, how are politics and government negatively impacting your life and your relationships. So that's what we should be talking about as this live gets spread to more people. Hopefully this live will do so. Obviously, some of my videos have been getting a lot of traction, which is really cool, but it would be awesome to get back to getting hundreds of people into these lives. So if you're doom scrolling by and you want to stay a while, I think we always have very interesting conversations where we just don't debate constantly left versus right nonsense. We talk about solutions on the show. We talk about how to solve all the problems in civics with our political system and talk about it's not too late. So it's certainly not too late. We can fix everything, but people have to stop fighting with each other and being divided. That's the plan by so many of these forces in government, from the corporate dictators to the white nationalists to certain foreign governments that are trying to divide us. And if you really want to understand the solution, I have it for you. And I say that with confidence because people have been reading the plan. The plan is underneath my profile. People have been reading the plan, and I expected to get a lot of, somewhat negative feedback on the plan, but I don't. I just don't. People are all about it. They agree that the things that I've laid out would connect and unite people from the right and the left, and truly restore our democracy. Not even just restore the democracy, bring our democracy back to the people in a way that it's never done before. So we've always had manipulation by corruption and corporate special interests and so forth. But obviously all the protections that we had, like campaign finance reform, the fairness doctrine in media, and so forth, the rich and the powerful have been eroding these things. We don't speak nice to each other anymore. That's right, we don't. Thanks, care about it all. We certainly don't. And that's just because we're picking these fights about immigration and other issues that are important, but they're not the most important things. The most important thing is it's not just a phrase. We the people is not just a phrase. It's the foundation that our constitutional republic was founded upon, that we the people, it's not we the corporations, it's not we the foreign governments, it's not we the NGOs, it's not we the billionaires, it's we the people. And as Abraham Lincoln said, a government for the people, by the people. And that's where we all lose sight of what truly matters is that. And if we could do that, if you can restore representation back to the people, because you have right now the vast majority or the majority of people who are representing us are fully corrupted or poisoned by the system. And they're either in government too long and ultimate power corrupts, or if you're in power too long, it certainly corrupts. And if you are being paid and raising money by corporations, corporate special interests, or religious zealots, or foreign governments even using dark money and foreign in certain companies, or by the billionaires that control so much of our technology. There's so many ways that our representation is being corrupted. And then on top of it, you pour on that the executive branch, it continues to erode power from the legislative branch and to ignores the Constitution, right? It ignores the rule of law. So we all know that that no one is above the law is a bunch of bullshit. We've seen that time and time again, that there are people that are above the law, starting at the very top, and that's a problem. These are the fundamental principles that we should all agree upon, that no one is above the law. Government for the people, by the people should be the rule of the day. And that's not something that anyone can argue with, really, unless you're a communist or unless you're a fascist or unless you're someone that truly believes in having an authoritarian or an autocracy. No one who actually wants self-rule would disagree with any of those things. So I'm going to take some guests. If you're interested in talking about, it doesn't matter if you're right or left, I want to know how politics and our government is negatively impacting your life and your relationships. Because this is what really matters in life, right? It's about relationships and your life. And people sometimes think that politics is a little disconnected from real life. It's not, right? Not just mentally, it's not. And of course, physically as well. Like literally everything government does has a direct impact on your life. You just may not connect the dots all the time. But if you're someone that believes government is the problem and not the solution, then you need to get your head checked, because the government is the only solution. Now, you need to be skeptical of your government, and you always need to challenge your government. The problem with our government is that it's a people problem. It's not a government administrative problem or a functioning of our government problem. It's just the people we have in government and how they are being fully corrupted. I can link back every single issue you might want to talk about back to corruption in our government, meaning greed and corruption, and people staying in power too long and being in politics for all the wrong reasons. Every single issue will come back to those two things. And if you want to talk about a particular issue that's negatively impacting your life and your relationships, let's talk about it. You can join the show. You can tap the request button below by the pink and blue profile silhouettes. You can tap the link there, tap and join the show and talk about right or left, how is politics, government negatively impacting your life and relationships. We normally have very decent discussions, civil discussions. If you're someone that's completely off the rails, I will call you out on it. But if you're just a normal, decent, having a civil discussion, I tend not to do that unless I think you're just so ignorant on certain subject matters. But even then, I'll try and steer you straight if I can and get you to think a little bit differently about our political system. So while we have more people joining, we can also talk about the e-files a little bit. If anyone wants to talk about the e-files, I haven't been following it closely today, other than it was, I think, a relatively unanimous House vote. This is the absurdity of the e-files. It's just stunning. We have to have a vote. Now all the Republicans are voting to release the e-files. Trump could have done this at any point over the past 9 months. He should have just released them. But now we're still going through, obviously, the House releasing them. Now that Trump has told the Republicans it's okay to say release them. It's just absurdity, other than one person. And now it went to the Senate. And I think the Senate has approved it as well. So the maddening part of this, while the e-files is not unimportant, it's certainly important. It's very important, especially to the victims, and potentially what it could lead to, sort of the rumor, if it's connected to a foreign government or not. But so far, we see very little media talking about that whatsoever. And I don't think you're going to see anything in e-files about any foreign government. That doesn't mean that there's not some involvement. It just means that it's not going to be in there, because they would never let that be in there about the foreign government that a lot of people think that may have been in there. So it's all cleaned up. Let them have them. It may be, who knows? I think that would be a challenge to clean up the files. It's just the absurdity of all this is that we all know, whether you're MAGA or liberal or anywhere in between, that the absurdity of the people that control our system, the people in power, the people with the wealth, the people that represent us, so many of them are just despicable pieces of shit. Like, there's no other way to say it. They're despicable, horrible human beings that have no integrity, that have no morals, that have no character, that have no trustworthiness. And yet we accept this relatively. Like, we're saying that we go along with it. This is like normalized, and it's insane that this is normalized in our world, because I always tell people, if there were 50 million people or more that wanted to have a 28th or 29th Amendment to eliminate all the corruption and make sure our politicians can't stay in power too long, that would change everything, because all of a sudden you'd have good people moving into government wanting to be temporary civic servants. I know there's 50 million people out there. I know there's well over 100. And I know most of my audience that's watched my videos and the tens of thousands of comments that I've received on those videos, that most everyone understands there's at least 50 million people that would want to enact the 28th and 29th Amendment. The 28th Amendment would say that all elections need to be publicly funded by people, meaning human beings, not artificial entities like corporations, NGOs, foreign governments, etc., and all the dark money. Virtually everyone agrees with that. And the 29th Amendment means term limits, that being a politician cannot be a career. And the vast majority of people agree with that as well. Now, term limits aren't a perfect solution, but it is much more consequential for the good that there's term limits than it does in bad. So meaning, if you have someone who's a great representative, people would say they should be able to stay in office longer. There's a good argument for that. But at the end of the day, it's better. There's more pros than cons by making sure there's a constant rotation of people who are representing us in our government. And people don't think we can change it. We could get rid of Trump. We could get rid of the Clintons and any the Bushes in the past, and the billionaires that want to run for presidents, and the people in Congress that are enriching themselves, and the justices that are taking gifts and taking bribes in the judiciary. We can remove all of it. All of it. But it takes a populist movement to do it. I would advise people, if you're just going to vote blue, which we should in the next election. I'm a staunch independent. I've never been connected with the Democratic or Republican Party in terms of being registered with either, even though my views are more progressive in many ways, although I do have some conservative leanings, you could say. But at the end of the day, if we want to keep our democracy, there's no question that you have to vote blue the next time, because you'd have to have some adherence to the Constitution, to democracy, and to the rule of law. And the blue party right now is the only party doing that. But that doesn't mean, that's not a long-term solution by any means. It's just a temporary solution. We need to replace politicians from both parties with temporary civic servants. And I know there's not many people in here right now, but the vast majority of people would agree with that, and we can certainly do it. And that's why my account seems to be growing. I'm getting tens of thousands of followers now. I need to get to obviously 1 million. And then if you read the plan, the link is underneath my profile. We need to grow a movement of 50 million people strong. I know it sounds crazy. It's not. It can certainly be done, and we just need more people promoting it. So if anyone wants to join and have a discussion, it would help talk about right or left. How are politics negatively impacting your life and relationships? Because we all know we're all living within this strange political era, and whether you're a MAGA or a liberal, even MAGA knows life is not good. Affordability sucks. The rich and powerful are not paying their fair share of taxes. You can't afford groceries. People are having problems with housing. Healthcare is a complete mess. You can argue about people having problems with abortion, what's happening to the unhumane aspect of the immigration process, process of immigration, what's happening around the world with China and Russia, the absurdity that's around us, all being done by these people who are just terrible human beings, sociopaths, psychopaths, narcissists, just indecent human beings. And we continue to let them, and I truly mean that, let them, we are to blame, meaning the people are to blame because we haven't risen up, especially the last three generations, Gen X, Gen Y, and Gen Z. We're not doing shit. We're other than being controlled or manipulated into thinking we can only vote blue or red. You don't have to just vote for blue or red. Technically, right now, from a practical perspective, that is true. You have to vote blue or red, otherwise you're wasting your vote. But if you have a grassroots movement that rises up to support a 28th and 29th Amendment, you could clean up literally everything quickly, too. It would not take long. And then you could go and address the hundreds of issues that are plaguing us, everything from AI to affordability to you name the issue, we could solve it. So that's why I want to take some guests. If anyone wants to join as a guest and talk about if you're right or left, how are politics and government negatively impacting your life and relationships? Are you having problems paying for rent? Are you having healthcare issues? Because I can get people to understand what's happening with all these issues and how we solve these things. Because right now, it seems to be the consensus, even with the people in the middle and even a portion of people on the right, that healthcare is a big issue, and it should be. And affordability is a big issue. And that seems where the Democrats are leaning towards on their messaging, is talking about affordability. And obviously, we have a problem with Gen Z as well, particularly on the boys and the men on Gen Z that have been manipulated into thinking that they have to be tough and masculine. And there's only one masculine party, and that's the right party. That's bullshit. They've been manipulated by the Ben Shapiros, the Charlie Kirks, the Candace Owens, the Nick Fuentes, the Joe Rogans, and many, many influencers that have their ears, and they're being manipulated to voting or to thinking that the party on the right, or Trump in particular, Trump, this guy is tough. He's a wuss. He's the most insecure human being. I think he truly is one of the most insecure human beings I've ever seen. And I've been following Trump since the 70s, the late 70s. As a young child, I knew about Trump growing up in New York and what a piece of shit this guy was. So, anyone who argues for him being, that he's going to do anything good, you're nuts. He's just placating you with a couple issues and pretending he's a tough guy. He's really nothing other than an insecure, one of the most insecure narcissists in the world is Donald Trump. That guy needed to get punched in the face when he was in fifth grade. Obviously, he probably even had lawyers back in fifth grade to make sure that didn't happen. But that he really needed to get, I'm not an advocate of bullying, but obviously he was, right from the get-go. Who knows? But he's always been a despicable human being. So what about let's take some questions in the comments. Until anybody wants to join me, I'm going to take some questions in the comments in the meantime. And let's talk about these things. Just got the #1 gifter badge. Thanks, Red Iron Ranch. Good to see you here as often as you are. What about Epstein texting during the Cohen hearing? Mr. Z, if you wanted to come on and tell me about that. What about Epstein texting during the Cohen hearing? Did I know about this? I don't know specifically what you're talking about. I don't get too involved in the Epstein files too deeply and know every facet of it. So I'm not sure. If you want to come on and tell me about it, please do. Trump getting $20 trillion into the economy. Okay, we got our first troll. This is funny. So you can always know it's a troll. G2L1622. Let's see. Trump getting $20 trillion into the economy. Do you just blurt out numbers like Mark Zuckerberg? Do you even know what $20 trillion looks like? Even the magnitude of that much money? $20 trillion into the economy. What a nut job. Yeah, the United States government only brings in $5 trillion a year from all tax revenue. But apparently to G2, Trump getting $20 trillion into the economy. Nice to see you here trolling away, whoever you are, but what a pathetic, you better use facts. Otherwise you're going to get torn apart. In the recent doc release, she was texting him about questions to ask. Oh, interesting. Did that just come out today? Because I was paid attention a little bit this morning, and then I was busy doing some other things. Stated in the news media, political debate, share your thoughts. Looking at this, an AI bot saying political debate, share your thoughts. Maybe Friday. Okay. Anyway, we can talk about the e-files if you want. If anyone wants to come on and talk about the e-files, that's always a popular subject. It is important. I used to think it's not so important, but of course it is for the victims, for especially, I think it's most important. Obviously, you feel horrible for any sort of human trafficking and sex trafficking that happens. But what the bigger problem to focus on is the cause, the root cause. And that's despicable men using their wealth and their power to leverage people, young women, and not have any accountability for it. That's the sickening part, is there's no accountability for it. And these people literally are our representatives, former presidents, current presidents, and billionaires, people that have so much influence over our society and over our technology and over the tools that we use on technology every day. And we allow these people to have control over us. And we don't demand a complete transformational change in our political system to kick everybody out, to get rid of all career politicians, and to get rid of these billionaires and make sure they're paying their fair share of taxes, because they are robbing society blind. There's a direct correlation between homelessness and the amount of billionaires and the amount of wealth going to the top, right? And it's just ridiculous that the United States of America, as a capitalist like I am, that the United States of America, the wealthiest nation in the world, has such problems with inequality in wealth. People not being able to feed themselves, not being able to house themselves. This is disgusting. And as Americans, even if you believe in becoming wealthy, and I do, you can become wealthy. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you become wealthy from cheating the system or manipulating the system, that's where the problem is. All right, supposedly during the Cohen hearing, he was texting multiple Dems during the Cohen hearing. Why was he texting Dems? Epstein was texting Congresswomen during a hearing. I guess obviously this was a long time ago. But what is the result of that? So he was texting certain people during the hearing, and what was his motive at that time? Forgive me for not connecting the dots that quickly. If anyone wants to come on and tell me about that, join as a guest, hit the links below, this pink and the blue silhouette, and let's talk about it. Do you think Trump is in the files? Well, he's absolutely in the files. Do I know what he did? Doesn't matter. He's close with Jeffrey Epstein. He knew what was going on, whether he actively participated or not, which he can't imagine he didn't. He's just a shyster, right? That's what Trump is. And he's been accused and convicted of R. So of course he's in the files. Of course he's there. If you don't look at Trump's lack of character and accountability, or lack of character and integrity and morality, purchasing the Miss America pageant just so that he can basically look at women while they're getting dressed. I mean, this guy is a sexual predator and he's a total creep. So of course he's in the files. There's no doubt that he's absolutely in the files. He's a sexual predator. And he's a creep. Like many of the other people are. I'm not only blaming Trump, but of course he's there. He's just a douche who was manipulating the questions Dems were asking. Oh, interesting. Okay, that makes sense. Thanks for the fan club. I appreciate joining the fan club. Getting more and more people into this live, which is great. If you haven't watched my videos or haven't followed me, please follow me and please watch my videos. I think some of them are incredibly insightful about understanding the powers that are inside the White House, that are controlling Trump, that are using him as a stooge, a useful idiot, a vessel, whatever adjective you want to use. Trump is clearly being a useful idiot to some of these billionaires, Silicon Valley billionaires, to, of course, Project 2025 and the WC Nationalists, and of course also to the State of Is and the Ziists, like I used to say, and also even to a smaller degree, Russians. So they're all working behind the scenes from within the White House. I'll have another live on that maybe later today about that issue, because that video has done really well and has over 300,000 views. And I think one of them has 27,000 reshares or reposts. And that's really awesome to see, because obviously I'm growing my audience and that gets more people focused on actually solving the problems. If you haven't seen a citizen's plan to bring representation back to the people, the link can be found underneath my profile. It's only like a 5-minute read. I think it's an interesting read, and it will open up your minds, I think, to realize that this constant, we have to vote blue or we have to vote red, and this two-party system bullshit, which will always be a two-party system, but the current corruption within the two parties is so poisoned. Like, we're literally in poisoned ground, that the corruption goes so deep on both the Republican and Democratic side. Now, I don't think that both parties are the same. Democrats are taking a lot of money from a lot of special interests. That's why they caved on the shutdown last week, is because the ATC unions and the airline unions and so forth that contribute heavily to the Democratic Party were pressuring the Democrats to cave and open up the government, which was a travesty, because they were standing on the right side of justice in order for healthcare. And there's something that I want to talk about healthcare. If you're, I'm going to get to some of these comments in a moment. If you're something who doesn't realize about healthcare, most people on the right, not most, a large portion of people on the right, quite a few people on the right, however you want to phrase it, understand that healthcare is not becoming a right versus left issue. A lot of people on the right understand that universal healthcare, we need to have truly universal healthcare, is a great thing, and that we should absolutely have it. Now, if you're someone that says, no, we shouldn't, I'm going to make you think about this differently. Everyone talks about universal healthcare, and a lot of people bring up, well, then we're not going to have the services, and we're going to have to wait for things. Bullshit. That's also bullshit. Universal healthcare, all it means, think about this, all it means, if done well, and if we supported it, all it means is that the government is paying for your health care instead of your corporate health insurance, or you paying for your own health insurance, or your own small business paying for health insurance. It has nothing to do with the hospitals. It has nothing to do with the drug manufacturers. It has nothing to do with the doctors. It has nothing to do with any of that. It's just who is paying for it. So do you want the government to pay for it? And we can do that by raising taxes on the ultra, ultra wealthy easily. And it's the biggest tax cut that Americans would probably ever see, is if you got universal health care, because it means that you would no longer have to pay for your health care through your company or personally, and nothing else has to change. It just means, so if you're protecting and you don't believe you should have universal health care, the only thing you're protecting is the insurance companies. And why would you want to protect for-profit insurance companies? This should be absolutely a socialistic program where the government, because it has your best interest in mind, the government has your best interest in mind much more than a for-profit company, because the government wants to keep you healthy, and being healthy keeps you productive, and being productive keeps you paying taxes. For-profit companies in healthcare, they don't want to keep you healthy. They could care less if you're healthy enough. They actually want to keep you a little bit sick, so that you make sure that you're paying into the system. They want to maximize their profits. So for-profit healthcare insurance companies is the only thing that has to go away with universal healthcare. So that's the thing that I think Democrats do a terrible job in conveying to Americans, is that universal healthcare means that the government is going to pay for your healthcare, not your private insurance companies. That's it. Nothing else has to change. Literally everything else can stay the same. It will be cheaper for all of us. You will get a massive tax break because you will not be paying for your healthcare services anymore. And because it would be much more efficient. Universal healthcare is far more efficient than for-profit healthcare, as 38 other countries have already proven. the cost per individual, per capita, goes way down with universal healthcare. And the services don't have to change at all. We already have, in many parts of the country, some great healthcare services. So none of that has to change. So I know I'm going off on a rant about healthcare, but it's really important because healthcare is going to be a big issue. And people don't understand, some extreme people on the right don't understand that universal healthcare would be an incredible tax break instead of tariffs, because tariffs are a tax increase. So here you have Trump promoting tariffs, which is taxing all regular Americans that buy groceries and everything else more. And yet we don't want universal health care, which is a tax decrease. If we actually got rid of tariffs and had universal health care, everyone would do much, much better because you would not be paying for your health care. And if you needed to raise more money for health care, we should tax the ultra wealthy. I'm not talking about the 1%. People don't understand the 1% between the 0.001%, meaning the ultra wealthy that are not paying their fair share of taxes, and the corporations that are only paying less than 10% of the entire revenue that comes into the government each year. All right. So let's see. I'm going to go to some comments. I know there's been a bunch of comments as I was doing that rant, so I'm just going to go back a little bit. You pay insurance premiums you don't use. They still get paid. Absolutely, Mr. Z. What's for-profit healthcare, right? So for-profit insurance companies, so they're going to try and make money. That's why, why would you want to protect United Healthcare or Blue Cross and Blue Shield or Aetna? These companies are for-profit. They're paying their CEOs tens of millions of dollars, their executives tens of millions of dollars. Their profits are incredible, and they shouldn't be, right? Because they're making money off of the backs of us. See, look at that. I vote Trump, but I agree with you on healthcare. So that's nice to see, G2. Maybe you're not a complete troll. I vote Trump, but agree with you on healthcare. And that's the thing. Not most, but a lot of people on the right, especially people in rural areas, agree that healthcare needs to be a universal right, and that's going to be a winning formula, I think, going forward. The government doesn't have any money, and I don't want to pay your children's insurance. All right. So user 854, the government doesn't have any money. That's just a really high-level generic bullshit statement. The government takes in $5 trillion a year in tax revenue. It could take in, and it should be taking in $7 to $8 trillion. So if corporations were paying their fair share of taxes like they used to do in the 60s and 70s, and ultra wealthy people were not hiding their money and they were paying their fair share, we would have an additional $3 trillion a year, meaning up to $8 trillion a year. That money could be used to pay down the national debt. That money could be used to pay for universal health care. If you wanted to use, in theory, pay down the entire national debt, you could pay it down in 13 years. So if you say the government doesn't have any money, you don't know what you're talking about, is that we're getting the rich and the powerful and corporations are stealing $2 to $3 trillion a year out of what they should be paying into their revenue in terms of tax generation each year. Do the numbers. That's the government has. And then, of course, you should focus on waste and fraud as well. So it's not about just a revenue issue. Of course, there's $600 billion out of the $5 trillion is going towards fraud, foreign fraud. 60 Minutes did a great show on this about 6 months ago to show that there's $600 billion of fraud that, by the way, Doge didn't even touch this issue of $600 billion in fraud. So we should clean up our spending. We should clean up the fraud. And we should make sure we're taxing the rich and the powerful and corporations because they are not paying their fair share of taxes. And we would have more than enough money to do virtually everything that we need to do. Tell me which of those countries are doing healthcare better. France, number one in the world in related to healthcare. I think I haven't looked at Cuba lately. I think Cuba, maybe they've been having a hard time over the past few years. But Cuba, as a communist country, actually used to do healthcare really well. France does healthcare far better than we do. Most of the European countries do healthcare way better than us. Now, it does not mean when you say better healthcare, that means for everyone. Some of our top healthcare, if you can afford it, is incredible. And some of the top doctors, because we live in a capitalistic system without those socialist programs, we have really great healthcare at the very top level. But overall, across our society, there are 38 countries doing healthcare much better than us. And that's just the last time I checked. And not only do I know that from statistics, I've lived it. I've been in other countries and needed healthcare and watched it happen in real time in Europe. So they have much better healthcare. And people that are in Canada has much better healthcare than us. The stories mostly about people having to wait for treatment in Canada is mostly BS. There are some instances. I used to play a lot of hockey with a lot of Canadians, and I still do, and they often go back to Canada. So some of the BS that you're hearing, people come to the United States from Canada for certain procedures. That does happen. That doesn't mean you can't have private healthcare as well in this country. Just because you have universal healthcare doesn't mean you'll get rid of all private healthcare and private insurance. You can still have both. And it just depends if you need something extra. Cuba was great until Trump reapplied sanctions. So I think that's probably right, Gen Z, even though it's not Gen Z, it's Jen-Z. Cuba actually did have really good healthcare up until recent years. Obviously, they're having some big problems now. But of course, any problem that Cuba has is, of course, due to us. The influence we have in Cuba is sickening, and what's happening in Cuba is shameful. What insurance company should we be using? We can use, it's called Medicaid for All, TC Lou. So the insurance company you should be using is Medicaid for All. That's what should be happening. So if you're too young to know what Medicaid is, I only know what it is from the COVID days, is Medicaid and Medicare is what the government offers right now. And it's brilliant. It is actually brilliant. I had an ACL surgery done in the COVID era after I left my job, and I was on Medicaid, and it paid for my entire ACL with the doctor that I wanted to go to, and I didn't pay literally a penny. So what we should be using is Medicaid for All, meaning universal healthcare. Medicaid for All just means universal healthcare for every single American citizen. That's what we should be using. And that would give you a huge tax break. You're welcome, TC Lou. That would have a huge tax break, because whether you pay insurance through your company or through personally or through your small business, you wouldn't have to pay those things. I used to run a large small business many years ago, and I used to pay for my family $2,000 a month, and that was over 10 years ago. It was close to $2,000, not over, sorry, $1,800 a month for healthcare. The insanity of having to pay $1,800 a month for healthcare for a family makes no sense. Name an insurance company that helps American people. Yeah, exactly, right? So I think I know what you're talking about, TC Lou. Name an insurance company. Insurance companies are the biggest scam. There are certain things, I'm a full-on believe in capitalism and democracy, but when it comes to certain things, people have to take their heads out of their asses and just think about society, the good of society, what's best for all of us. When it comes to things like housing, food, healthcare, other insurances, those things are better done not through private insurances, because private for-profit insurances does not do anyone justice. Why should they? I would much rather have, when there's wildfires, have an insurance company in each state, or it could be federally done, that you don't have to worry about losing your insurance just because you live on the coast or you live in a tornado area or so forth. This needs to be a program for profit insurance companies, because if they're not making money, they just pull out, right? So why do you even have insurance? And then in order to get insurance, the government usually has to step in at that point, which is not efficient whatsoever. So insurance companies are a scam when it comes to any sort of society-based issue. All right, Dip says, TK, with universal healthcare, how can we ensure the level of care does not decline versus private? Well, you just have to look at the facts. The facts are there are dozens, literally dozens of other countries where the overall level of healthcare is far superior to ours. France is the ultimate example, I think. I think they're still rated number one. I haven't looked in a year or two. But France has always been incredible. Germany's healthcare system is great. The Scandinavian countries and the Japanese companies, there's not a decline. Is actually an increase, an improvement in general level of healthcare overall. Now, I think what you have to probably talk about is the highest levels of healthcare that generally only the wealthy people can afford in America. There's many ways to do that. So don't let, there's nothing that we can't fix, address. I'm not saying universal healthcare would be perfect forever. It's not, nothing's perfect. What I'm telling you is that it would be an incredible tax break. You wouldn't have to change anything in the system other than getting rid of private insurance companies. It just should be government paying for the healthcare services. And government being involved would ensure that we're not getting ripped off, because they would be able to negotiate and demand lower profits and lower margins for companies. And that's just a good thing. It's not a bad thing. Debating universal healthcare, share your views. And look at the AI bots in here. So they know what I'm talking about, and they prompt people to make comments. I hate everyone more now than I did. I don't know what that means. I don't know if you're returning. Folks don't talk universal healthcare, but totally cool with their premiums tripling, right? And the premiums tripling are the biggest tax increase you'll ever see in your life is your premiums doubling or tripling. Talk about tax increases. So now we have tariffs, tax increase, and now we have changes to healthcare that might happen that are going to increase taxes as well. These are all, you can just think of them all as taxes, even though they're not, healthcare wouldn't be defined as a tax break or a tax increase. That's essentially what it is. Thanks, Dips. Don't get me wrong. I want universal healthcare. Understood. If you're welcome to come on and you want to talk about it, I didn't think you were. It's good to challenge. We should always, I'm not saying government universal healthcare doesn't come with some risks. It doesn't come with risks if it's implemented properly. And we have so many other countries that we can pull from their knowledge and their experience and how their system and the failures they've went through. But universal healthcare should absolutely be a thing. A lot of people on the right, rural America, agrees with that. But for some reason, they won't vote for it sometimes. That's incredibly crazy. Yo, Mr. Global, what's up? Good to see you here. The rest of the development world has it exactly, right? People need to stop thinking. The problem with universal healthcare and any of these other programs is everyone starts screaming socialism. Anyone that screams socialism just means they don't know what socialism is. It's really that simple. They don't know what socialism is if they're screaming about it, because socialism and socialistic programs are very different things. Socialism essentially means that your society owns everything, even the means of production. Like everything that happens, the government and the society own all corporations. Similar to communism, with the exception of communism owns, the means of production, as they say, which I always hated that phrase. But communism is a non-religious society where everyone has everything divided equally. Socialism doesn't have everything divided equally, but this government still owns everything. So there's only one. Let's see who gets it in the comments. There is only one true socialistic country in the world right now, operating under economy of socialism. Who is able to name that country? Let me know in the comments. I am watching. Only one. And I'll give you a hint. It's not any Scandinavian country. There is not a single Scandinavian country that operates under socialism. They have some socialism industries, but they are capitalistic or capitalistic democracies or social democracies that have some. What's up, G-Man? No, you are wrong, G-Man. Norway is not socialism. Absolutely not. It's socialism and capitalism. They have some socialistic programs like healthcare and others. But Glenn, try again. Glenn, good to see you here. And then, of course, there's Sweden. Nope, it's not Sweden. It's not Canada. It's not Brazil. Glenn with the Norway flag again. Half man, you're wrong. It's not any of those countries. Let's see who's going to get it. Don't cheat. Don't go to ChatGPT or to Google. Who is the only socialistic country in the world? There's only one, not Canada. Nope. There it is. Gen Z. Did you cheat, Jen? Jen, did you cheat? Let me know if you cheated. That's okay if you did cheat. Oh, no. All right. It's China. China is the only socialistic economy and country in the world. It is only China. Cuba is more pure communism. You can make an argument for Cuba if you want to call it too. But China is the only socialist. Now, they are ruled by a communist party, and that communist party has adopted a socialistic system. And this is why no one trusts China, because you have a communist government, but they don't operate under communism. Not everything is divided equally between all of its citizens, and that would be communism or Marxism, where all the resources in the country and all the money that generated would be divided equally. So equal housing, equal everything, that's communism. So China doesn't operate in communism. They operate under socialism with some temporary capitalistic processes. And you can say that's why in China, you can become a billionaire, but you're not really a billionaire in China. You're never a billionaire because the state will just take it when it wants to. So you're temporarily a billionaire in China because you're living under socialism, and anything that you own can be taken from you. And that's why if you are a billionaire in China, you try and diversify and buy property in London or in Miami or New York, and you try and hide assets around the world, always in a democratic, capitalistic society, because that can't be taken from you. That's how it works. And that's why you don't trust Russian billionaires. Don't invest in Russia. They invest in their Russian companies. When they send their kids to school, they invest their education in Switzerland or somewhere else. They buy properties. They buy yachts. They buy things that the government would have a hard time taking away. That's why a self-ruled country like capitalism is always superior to anything else. All right, so folks need to watch the videos of foreigners living in China. It's quite surprising. I've watched a lot of those videos. The foreigners that live in China talk about how amazing China is because it is very modern in some of their big cities. It is very modern. Their air quality has gotten better. Their way of life has gotten much better. And we've allowed that to happen, right? Because all of our production has gone over to China and they've become very wealthy, which is nothing wrong with that. But the people who are the foreigners that go to China and think China is so amazing, certain parts can be amazing on a day-to-day basis, but they don't have certain rights. Those rights can be taken away from them. So as long as they are on the up and up and not doing anything wrong, they are guests in that country living under socialism, and and the same thing can be said to Qatar or Saudi Arabia. If you're in Saudi Arabia or Qatar, you're getting an allowance. Every citizen gets money for free in those countries from the oil revenue, and they're being placated with money. They're basically being bribed, right? They're being bribed in Qatar, in Saudi Arabia, they're going to give up their rights in order to have an allowance. That's really what it is. In order to have money and never have to worry about housing or food or so forth. But they don't have true freedom. And that's, of course, always a problem. Do you see how fast rights are getting touched now? I did not. There's some comments that I missed. China is great. China, I've never been there, so I can't say, but China is going to be screwed. China does not have a good future ahead of itself. It's surrounded by enemies. It has massive population decline, massive aging population. So depending on what happens with AI and other things, China is for a world of hurt in the future. And so is places like Japan and Germany and other countries. We don't have the same problems here with our birth rates are not nearly as bad here. Eventually we could, but we're not even close to the birth rates that they have in China. China has overreported their population for years, and now they are trying to fix it. They have much smaller population than most people think, and I think 50% of their population is over the age of 50. It's something absurd like that. Our birth rate is on the decline. It is. I think it's at 1.6 kids per woman, 1.4 or 1.6. And in order to have a steady population with no immigration, you need to be at 2.1. So if you have 2.1 kids per female, then you'll have a steady population. So we do have a declining population, but of course we also have a lot of immigration. which is normal for a lot of countries, that when you have declining birth rates, you need to supplement that with immigration. What's up, Mr. Global? How are you today?
I'm doing all right. TK, good to see ya.
Yeah, man, it's just been keeping busy, and I needed a little break, and now I think I'm going to be back, hopefully hardcore.
All right, that's good to hear. I'm glad to see you back.
Yeah, yesterday I think you joined for a few minutes yesterday. Was my audio all jacked up yesterday?
No, I thought it was fine.
Oh, interesting, because I didn't think it was coming out of the microphone, and I thought there was a problem with the audio. All right, cool.
I didn't notice anything.
Rick says I'm moving to China because dating liberals is annoying. Rick, good to see you. I haven't seen you in a while. I don't think it has anything to do with liberals, Rick. I think it just has to do the state of our culture is sort of a bigger problem, I think.
The the China thing's interesting. There was a video I saw, I don't remember when, but it was a lady that was from China, and she was talking about their birth rates, and she was like, it's a math issue. They say they have 1 billion people, but she did the math. It was like each woman would have had to have like 5 children. So, like, our numbers that we have for how many people they claim that they have is not accurate.
That's what happens under a communist government that Rick is such a proponent of, is that you can't get real information. They only give you the information that you want because they don't have obviously open media and they don't have open censuses. So they just lie. So I think it was reported at one time they had 1.4 billion people, but I think the projections now are like 800 million that they have.
I, yeah, it was completely different from what everybody thought they had.
Yeah, and we should look it up. Someone wants to look it up, please do so and let me know in the comments. What percentage of the population in China is over 50%? Rick, you got to know this if you're still here. I'm sure you still know this. And that means when you're over 50 or you're over 45, your production years are basically over, your consumption years. So you consume much less and you preserve. So you spend much less when you're below 45. People who spend the most in grow economies are between 20 and 45. Once you're over 45, your spending typically goes way down, and that means your economy shrinks. So it's not just a declining population when you're over 50, but now you also have to help pay for those over 50-year-olds with healthcare services and others. So they consume a lot more from the system and they pay much less into the system once you're over 50. So you can see how that can go south really quickly. Mont Andrew Times, you say, what's your opinion on immigration in Europe? So it's a great topic. I actually know quite a bit about immigration in Europe. Let's start with World War II. So the short answer is that all immigration done too aggressively ends up causing a lot of problems. We are at 43% here over 50, Overstreet Family Crew, 43% over 50 years old in the United States. Is that true? That's a pretty big number. So immigration, and going back to immigration in Europe, when you have wars like World War II and you lose a massive amount of men, just like what's happening in Russia and Ukraine right now, you will have to have immigration if you want to save your country. That's what happened after Germany and when they opened the doors to people from Turkey. So when all the Turkish people came in the 60s and 70s into Germany, otherwise Germany would have died because it didn't have enough men. And that's why when you go to Germany, you see a lot of people, a lot of women that are business owners in Germany because women have been around and they've had to pick up the slack in immigration. So you had to have immigration in those times. And then when you had Germany, I think took in 1 million immigrants from Syria under, I forget her name, the president of Germany, a bunch of years ago.
Merkel.
Merkel, yes, thank you. She was too aggressive and that caused problems. So, but you know, immigration is a two-edged sword. You have to do it the right way. Merkel invited 1 million Syrian refugees into Germany and assimilating into a culture, especially European cultures, all European cultures, which, you know, you have to speak their language, you have to assimilate into their cultures. It's not easy to do. So she just invited 1 million people to come in, and that causes a lot of upheaval. That causes a lot of problems. Those problems, but that same thing happened when they had to integrate East Germany from communism back to West Germany. Even though they were Germans, they were now, after 650 years living under communism, they had to assimilate back into a Western culture and a capitalistic culture. So this is not just about different cultures in terms of race and religion. Even when Germany had to do it with East Germany, there's still huge problems with integrating East Germans back into West Germans, even to this day. The amount of productivity that comes out of East Germany is a fraction, a tiny fraction of what West Germany does, even though they're integrated. So when you talk about integration on race and religion, it's not just race and religion, it also has other factors. So when a million Syrian immigrants came into Germany, you have their cultural differences, you have their race differences. Well, not the race is culture. And then you, of course, have religious differences, and that causes problems. So I think they were much too aggressive, but they needed more immigration because they have, just like Japan and China, they have a massive problem with native Germans not having enough kids. So what are you supposed to do as a government is you can either die, meaning your economy will completely collapse when it comes to Japan, China, Germany, and other countries. If you don't have immigration, you will collapse and it won't be pretty. Um, if so, you have to have immigration, but how you do it is important. And Germany bit off more than they can chew. And of course, immigrants and migrants are always going to move towards countries when they're being persecuted in their homelands. They're going to move to countries that have more opportunity. So that's my opinion on European, generally focusing on Germany. But Sweden's having a problem. Norway's having a problem with immigration. Um, it's a problem every country faces when you have immigration. It's always a problem because of cultures and religions and so forth. It doesn't mean you don't need it, because if you have declining birth rates, uh, it's really simple. Do you want your economy to completely collapse and not be able to pay for your social services and other things that you need? Or do you not? It's a tough call. What do you think, Mr. Global?
I mean, I believe the human experience, we're programmed to know when something's working for us or not. And I think a lot of times the reason why we're not expanding or producing as much is because our world around us isn't reflecting something that we approve of. I think if people felt like they lived in a place that was, resembled their interests, their wants, their needs, they had a more positive experience, then they're gonna reproduce. They're gonna be happier. The morale's gonna go up. Um, you know, I think it's a balance, right? It's this nature that our instincts inside of us. We know when something's not right, even if we don't know exactly what it is. So
Yeah.
I think it's easily fixed once you start doing things that um, people are happy with, and they're going to start creating.
Well, here's one problem with, by the way, hey, Mrs. Holman, good to see you. Long time no see. Glenn, thanks for that comment. So your mom is watching. She said you look great. Um, well, hello. I know you can't speak back to me unless you want to join as a guest, which you might be able to. Rick's here. So, Rick, I'm going to have you join in just a second. So I see you there, Rick. So hang on one second. One of the big problems that people don't understand about population is urbanism, is the growth of cities. And this is what happened in China. China, of course, had the one child policy. And then they also had a mass movement away from rural countryside into cities. And when people move to cities, cities are more expensive and it's harder to have kids and it's harder to raise kids in cities. So typically, when you are living in a city, what always happens, so basically it's industrialization. Any society that has mass industrialization, which we went through 30, 40 years ago, 50, 60, so 80 years ago. China just went through mass industrialization over the past 40 years. And whenever you have mass industrialization, including a one-child policy, you will always have a significant reduction in population. So what you were saying, Mr. Global, is if you think things are going well, you'll probably have more kids. If you're more optimistic, that's true. But the exception is cities just naturally have a huge impact on population declining.
I could agree with that, and that's just because of the sense of community. And there's a lot of um, points of view that aren't aligned. Usually people that are out in rural areas, they typically see the world very similarly. So you get that what do you call that? Diversification of mindset and point of views in cities, so things don't move quickly.
Yeah, and I think Rick's going to give us some more perspective on this as well because I don't think I'm probably covering everything. So, Rick, what's your perspective?
Well, I just like the idea that a falling birth rate is this huge problem. It's a huge problem if you're an investor. It's a huge problem if you have like a lot of debt to pay back as a country that you bet
Yeah,
on
you're
your future
suggesting that's a huge problem for
productivity.
any capitalistic society economy. Yes.
But the thing is, like, a falling birth rate means higher wages. Like across the board, there's less workers, there's more higher wages. It's just basic supply and demand, right? The fewer people, and this is why the people who are running things freak out about it, right? Like the reason Elon Musk is out there being like have more kids is because he has factories, right? They make cars, and he wants to pay people as little as possible. And so if there's more people, there's more competition for wages, and there's lower wages because of it, right?
Well,
Like
But
so
that's
talk to me about that. Sorry, Mr. Global. Go ahead first, Mr. Global.
I was just gonna say, like, on the contrary, though, less people usually means that the people that had the knowledge and the wisdom aren't theirs anymore to help further the agenda for the youth. So like it's this weird dichotomy of like, sure, you're right, but at the same time, usually
what
the quality of work goes down if there's less people.
that doesn't make sense. Also, we haven't seen that historically. I mean, one of the biggest examples of this, and it's kind of old, obviously, but if you go back, there's a book called Caliban and the Witch by Sylvia Federici, and she argues that like the reason that capitalism started to develop in like the 14th century. And the reason that like the church started to like crack down is like her book is kind of argument about like the development of like anti-worker ideologies and stuff and like capitalism, but she's talking about it because when the plague happens, wages like double. Like wages like go up dramatically because like so many people get wiped out. There's just like way fewer workers around, and the wages are really high. And so the church starts promoting births, right? The church goes after they go after quote unquote witches, and they switch over from the lunar to the solar calendar to make it harder for women. Like the witches were women who made abortifacients, and the reason they switch over to solar calendars is harder for women to track their cycles, and so that they were like they couldn't could like they were trying to make it harder to control for women to control how many kids they had, and they also started going after queer people around then too. The church wasn't really that interested in it until around the 13th century or the 14th century rather. Um,
Rick,
it's really good book.
I have a question for you, Rick. So in China, I don't know what this, but the last time I looked, like a year ago, year and a half ago, China's young people, if wages go up when birth rates decline, and obviously you have an aging population, why was there 24%, if I think right, people under the age of 28 or 29, there was 24% unemployment. Why was that?
Massive amounts of automation. That's like a huge thing about it.
So wages,
Massive
so
amounts of
then you go
automation.
against your own argument then. So it by supply and demand, you would suggest that wages go up, but if there's more
Right, but
automation
the
coming in, that
supply of jobs went down.
right. So much
So
so that
that
24% of
counteracts
the
that.
population didn't have, not 24% of young people didn't have jobs.
Sure. Well, also, what do you mean by young people? Are they still
I think there's
like
28. I think it was under 28. I don't have the stats right in front of me, but it was
because like if you're a student, you don't work. Like they don't like teenagers don't get jobs in China like that. Like you don't work if you're a student.
right,
That's just
right.
like a thing. And so like there aren't as many people working jobs when they're like in college.
Yeah, so that
To
statistic may have been
either.
not, well, maybe one of those
But like
stats.
it is going up. No, you're right. The youth unemployment rate is increasing. But it's always I want to say that it's always been higher than it is in the West, on
So they
account of
just can't
that.
get jobs then. So you're saying that even though the wages go up, but if there's no jobs, the wages would then come down again.
The economy doesn't just have one singular factor
Right, I
to it.
know.
Wages have gone up though. Wages have gone up dramatically in China over the
Well,
past
yes,
like
because
30
it's
years,
become an
partially
industrialized
because of
nation, of
child
course.
policy.
Right.
Right, like the wages have gone up a lot. I mean, for a lot of reasons, but like partially, and the unemployment thing is, I mean, that's true. That's been true across the board. And it's like it's AI's hitting. Like that's true in the West now too. They're like the college graduates in the West are not being able to find jobs because of AI. That's a universal thing right
Right, but
now.
that's just in the past
We've
year,
hit a
year and a
level of
half.
automation that's put a lot of people out of work, especially people who are just getting on the career ladder because AI is covering a lot of those like entry level positions where you're like answering phones or whatever,
Right.
and you're not really doing the tough stuff.
Well, the more a country industrializes, and China's been going through it now for 40 years, 50 years, things get more expensive. Labor gets more expensive, and that's why companies are moving to India, and to Myanmar, into the Philippines, and lots of
Yeah,
other places, right? And that's just
I
a
mean even
normal,
Chinese companies are offshoring their labor to
right?
like
That's a normal process of industrialization. As industrialization matures, wages go up, prices become more expensive, and you end up having farming out
the thing is like
labor.
China isn't financializing the way that Western economies did after they industrialized. Like a lot of these like major economies, you see like they industrialize and then they over financialize because they like the people they don't even want to bother like running a factory when you can just like make bets on other people running factories in other countries and shit like that rather than actually like doing industrial production.
Thank you, Lindsay.
But yeah, I think that like in general, I mean the thing is having more people around would make the problem even worse. There aren't enough. You're already telling me there's not enough jobs to go around, but you want more people. You want the population to grow.
I, I
Like
I never
this,
suggest.
this
I
doesn't
never
sound great.
suggested any of that. I didn't suggest that.
Well,
I was
Well,
just
I
well,
just like well, I'm not saying you in particular. I'm just saying in general, this like idea that like oh the birth rate crashing is like such a crisis. It's like well no, it means you're gonna have to pay nurses more.
no. It is a
That's not
crisis, and it's going to be a
really
crisis in China because they have to still support healthcare in their system for their aging population, which costs an enormous
sure.
amount of money. They have to get the money from somewhere.
Well, no, they just need the workers to do it, and you're telling me they have 24% unemployment, right? Like they don't need like
When they have an aging population and much fewer young people than they do old people, which means
but they
the
also
young
have a
people have to pay much
high
more
level.
taxes in order to
Here's the thing:
fund the older people.
that's not how the Chinese economy works because
It does work
their
like that too.
government is funded. The government is funded through state-owned enterprises and the revenues from the state-owned enterprises, so they don't need to tax the incomes of the population nearly as much. Like they don't have property taxes. They don't really do that kind of thing there. Like there are some like I think sales taxes and stuff like that, but like there's they're getting revenue because they own part of the industry and they use that revenue to spend on things like
Yeah, but the
healthcare.
revenue will, if they're offshoring, so forth, the revenue will probably still go down.
Well, you're not going to offshore state-owned industry. Well, actually, they have. Even if they do, the state-owned industries that they do, and that is true. There's some state-owned industries that have invested in like offshore facilities and stuff, and they're still going to get the benefits of those profits. Aren't going to just some guy. They're going to the Chinese state so that they can invest it in other things like healthcare.
Right. And when the guy doesn't behave, then they just take the guy's money away too.
Right, yeah. If there is just some guy, and like it is like, and it comes down to, yeah, that's that, yeah. If you're fucking up,
Right.
or like if you just fuck up, they're not bailing you out either. Like like the West was like the
Well, that's not
IMF was like
true with the real
begging
estate.
China
The
to
real
bail
trade,
out their real estate
yeah, the real estate
bubble.
bailouts have been huge in China.
The what?
The real estate bailouts have been massive in China.
No, they didn't bail them out. They begged them to bail them out. They didn't. The real estate failed. Like that guy, the Evergrande guy lost billions of dollars. That's what happened. A lot of those guys did like they just let them fail. And the West criticized them for that. They criticized the banks for that. They did have a
But
real
they're
estate
getting the
crash.
loans from the government banks, which are the government banks, since the banking industry is controlled by the government, so that they're letting them
Sure.
go down, but that's also costing the government.
Yeah, I mean, sure, but like the thing is, there's a heavy amount of savings in China, so it's not hurting the people nearly as much as our real estate crisis did. For
Right,
one
right.
thing, way more people like as a percentage have their house paid off. Like three-quarters of people in China have their house paid off. Like they own their own house; it's paid off.
Right, but a lot of
Uh,
those people got hurt because a lot of people bought multiple houses in China. Regular
oh,
people bought the apartments in China, and then what happened when
yeah,
Evergrande
like
went
a
down?
second house or whatever. But here's the thing: like then what you have is like you don't like if you have a savings economy rather than a debt economy, all you do is all you did was like lose a little money, but you still have your house, you still have your job, you still can feed your like you don't have. It's not like here where it caused like a massive spike in homelessness, and it's not like with people getting put out, like people ending up like it's like you lose out on some hypothetical future earnings that you were planning on, but like it's a heavy savings economy. And that has to do more with like cultural history, I think,
Yeah.
than necessarily any sort of like because of communism or anything like that.
T Felt
That's just
says
like how China.
T Felt has a comment here. Says they also have income from development around the world. He's talking probably about the Belt and what's it called? Belt and what initiative?
The Belt and Road,
Belt and Road. Belt
the
and
Belt
Road
and Road,
initiative.
the BRI.
Yeah, I'd like to know, dig into that to see if they actually have income from that, because a lot
I
of the
rode I rode a BRI train once.
and
It was awesome. It was a nice fucking train. It's like I rode from Laos into China on this BRI train that they built because they had to clear out the American bombs that we dropped there.
what does that mean? A
All the cluster munitions.
BRI train? Does that just mean a train that's been funded by the Belt and Road Initiative?
Yeah, it was funded by the Belt and Road Initiative. Like that was like one of the early projects that they
But that
did.
was within China?
Um, it was- no, it was in Laos,
I was on that. Okay.
and so like they had to clear out the cluster munitions that we dropped there during the Vietnam War to build the route, which is like one of the reasons infrastructure projects are so hard there. But no, it's like half the time it's running passengers to different parts of like the north half of Laos, and the other half the time it's running like goods, like freight.
Did you see
And
that?
it's not a high speed. It's just like it's a relatively fast standard rail. It goes like 110 miles an hour or whatever,
Hmm.
which is like faster than our Amtrak goes still, which is wild because Laos is like, I mean, the GDP per capita in Laos is like $3,000 a year,
Well, it's
but
just
they can
because
manage
the United
this,
States
they can
rails.
manage to have like a relatively advanced train because China like built it and China won too. Like it's like a win-win. Like they get a nice train. China gets a way to get like goods to Thailand.
Right.
Like it's a win-win for them. Like they're not China doesn't do it out of the goodness of their heart, but it's also like not necessarily like
No,
trying
it's
to like
soft power.
make
It's
anybody.
that's all about soft power, right? If Belt and Road Initiative is about having influence and soft power throughout Africa, throughout
I
as
mean,
many countries as they can, just like America would do.
I mean, China just wants to get like more access to the sea. Like that's the thing. They want
Oh,
like
not
the
just the
train was
sea. They want
initially
access
supposed to
to
go
the
all the way.
minerals and everything else, resources around the world, just like the United States does. So
Well, I
don't
mean,
try.
China's an export economy though, mostly. Most there's certain minerals that they don't have, obviously,
There's a lot of
but for the
minerals
most
actually.
part,
There's no oil and gas, of course, not minerals, but oil and gas, and they're actually
oil and gas.
and there are some
And like
quite
a
a few
handful,
minerals they
like
don't
they
have.
also have a ton of it, like domestic, like that domestic coal is like mostly what they use when they're not doing solar panels. And a lot of the rare earth stuffs they can get in China. Like they're also refining stuff for other people.
Yeah, they're an importer of
Uh,
agriculture, though, a major importer of agricultural oil and gas and other
sure.
things. So they're not self-sufficient,
Yeah,
basically.
soybeans,
Right.
oil and gas. They depend on stuff. I mean, every economy does. But the thing is, like, the reason that they're doing Belt and Road is mostly to sell things. Like they don't have. They have what everyone's talking about, the overproduction. Everything's like getting like there's deflation in China, and they want to like export more stuff so that they can keep like growing their economy. And you can't export stuff to people who don't like. You can't sell cell phones to people who don't have cell phone towers, and you can't ship anybody anything if they don't have any good ports. And so they're building ports and cell phone towers and roads so that they can sell more cars.
Right.
Like it's like they want to they want to sell more shit.
Well, it's
To
also
the rest of the
about
world.
it's just as much. I think you're being
Yeah,
a
'cause
little naive there. It's just as much about influence around the world and soft power. Don't try
Yeah,
and understate
but
that.
like, what does soft power mean? Like, what does that mean?
So what does it mean?
Like, what? Like,
From a
if
practical
that's
sense,
when.
if here's what it
No,
means
I
from
mean
a
in
practical
general, it
sense.
just means that you gain power by being nice to people.
That's right. That's
Like, oh no,
no,
like,
you gain access to making deals with people when you are making other deals. So you give someone a loan to create infrastructure, and guess what? When they need to help extracting their oil or their gas or their minerals out of the ground, they're not going to somebody else, they're coming back to you. So that's what soft power does. It ends up being a mutually beneficial
yeah.
relationship.
Well, I mean, it's better than the way the West does it, which is like usually through like let's coup their government because they don't want to play ball.
Oh,
We're
stop
gonna
it.
coup
Stop it. That I'm not saying that hasn't happened. But now you're getting that has happens a lot. It's happening right now in
It's the
Venezuela.
normal course of events.
It's happening. It's happening very now in
Western
Venezuela.
trade.
Right.
Right. I mean, it's not the first time we've tried to do this with Venezuela. We've been doing it for like a century or more, especially Latin America. I mean, we've like there's like I think there's like 70 something coups we did in Latin America since World War II. It's a lot. Like we do it all the time.
All right. It's funny. Our conversations with Rick always start off really wonderful, but they're always on the edge of falling off a cliff. So we won't let it fall off the cliff today.
The cliff for you, the cliff is whatever it comes to criticizing the American empire. You don't like it when I do that.
We
Yeah. I will
we
make note. Yeah. Absolutely.
we criticize it too.
Absolutely.
Just not as maybe
Never,
um
never in a format where, I'd rather have communism over the American Constitution and capitalism.
Well, I mean, it's just obviously superior system. Like, I mean, we can see that
No,
but
in the world.
no.
at the end of the day, we're clearly not the ones pulling the strings. So, I mean,
I
if
don't
we
understand
were,
TK
things
because
would be going differently.
the thing is, TK, you talk about all of these problems with the American political system and the economic system, and I agree with you most of the time. But then your solutions are just like shit that has been tried like 10,000 times before and never worked, not damn once. Like,
Oh, bullshit. That's not true.
it is too true.
No.
Which one?
Your argument
Yeah.
is to basically start the Green Party again. Like we didn't do that 30 years ago.
Why didn't the Green Party work?
A whole bunch of reasons, but generally because the capitalist system precludes the political system, right? And that, like, when we look at the way that the United States is structured, it's what Lenin would call a bourgeois democracy, right? It's a democracy, but for the ruling class to work out their differences. And it's never going to be made to work in favor of the working class because it's not designed to do that. It's designed to never do that. And so
Communism
whenever
doesn't
you
do
try
that
to play
either.
by the rules, they will change the rules or they will retrench, which is what's happened every time. You know, like sometimes you get a handful of wins and they retrench because at the end of the day, money's power. As long as you've got these guys walking around with billions of dollars, they're going to have political power. That's just how it fucking works.
Well, I mean, I think also we were sold this narrative about this green thing that was supposed to be better than what we had, and then we found that it wasn't as clean. It ended up actually hurting us more than we realized, and it requires more industry that we don't have and infrastructure that we don't have. And I think that's maybe why the Green Party. I mean, I want a clean world, right? Like I want clean things, but I also don't want to like fall into this trap of like assuming that it's better because someone sold me the idea that it was better. I mean, we've talked about this before, TK, with like the batteries and vehicles,
Yeah,
and
and you guys are wrong on a whole bunch of the shit that you say. It's wild. Like when you say that electric vehicles are more polluting than ICE vehicles over the course of their life, that's just nonsense. Like objectively nonsense. Yes, like it takes product to do production. You have to do a certain amount of CO2 is released in the atmosphere when you do that. Most of that can be eliminated if we just had more green industry generally. But the course of the lifetime, all of the things like to produce the steel and the aluminum and the plastics and stuff that go into an ICE vehicle also take pretty much the same amount of emissions to like produce those too. So it's like a 1-to-1. You're looking at like either way, producing a car takes a certain amount of emissions.
Let's look
Electric
into that.
vehicles,
Let's look
a
into
little
that for the
bit more
next thing.
intuitive.
I don't know what the lifetime values are, but obviously, electric cars do have tailpipes, just not here because the amount of minerals it takes to create the batteries and so forth does create an enormous amount of pollution, just not at home. Now, how that works out over a lifetime, I actually need to research that again to see what that's like.
Yeah, they wouldn't be doing it if they didn't. Like somebody did that math before we started making a whole bunch of electric
Oh,
vehicles.
don't make that
Like,
assumption. Oh, please don't
well,
make that
well,
assumption.
I didn't make these. I know that I've seen the math, but like it's like you guys aren't the first person to like think of like, oh, what about the cost to produce the thing? Is that going to affect it? Of course, like you got to look at that. But also like having electric cars is not the solution that anybody wanted anyway. What we want is fucking trains, right? We want is like that's like
Nah,
the way more obvious fucking solution is like way more train
depends on the
train
country.
travel.
Depends on the geography in the country. You just can't say that. The United States can never be a rail country. That what doesn't work in the United States.
China is the exact same size as the continental US.
No,
There's
it
rail
is the
all-
same size, but their location from city to cities are very differently allocated, and the geography is
They
very
have
different.
trains that go all the way. Do you know where Urumqi is?
And do you know how those trains are, how unprofitable they are, and how they're just basically empty?
Oh, of course they're not profitable, but they built them anyway because it helps the entire rest of their fucking society function. You know what else isn't profitable? The post office. And they want to get
Yeah,
rid of that
sure.
too. Right? Like
Right.
like it's like
the
you have
post
you want
office
to
is a
function
private-
society. You have to you know what else isn't
Post office
profitable?
is private.
Airlines are profitable. The only reason airlines are profitable is because they function as credit card companies.
Because
They're
they're banks,
printing
right?
fucking
They're
fake
financial
dollars, liquids and
institutions.
shit.
Right.
And all the airports are subsidized by the federal government, which is why whenever the fucking government shuts down, suddenly we don't have air travel. That's also not profitable. Some people are making
All right.
money off
All
of
right.
it.
Let's
The
shut it
whole
down.
is
So Janelle, so Rick, I always appreciate you here. I do have to make dinner. Janelle said Rick was on the cliff, and we are on the cliff. We've been, teetering on the cliff for a long time. So we're gonna shut down the cliff for tonight, and I'm gonna go make some dinner,
all right, TK.
and
Have a
then
good
I'll
night.
come back. See you guys. So thanks, Mr. Global. I'm gonna come back probably with later on today. Thanks everybody for watching. Please remember to follow and please repost some videos, and I'll see you guys later.